Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 186, Managing Your Early Career as an Introvert. Last week, I had the great pleasure of working with over 50 young people who were embarking on a professional apprenticeship. It was their induction event, and I observed a range of behaviours during our time together. Some appeared a little daunted and awestruck by the occasion. Some offered intelligent and thoughtful questions, and some gave off the air of, this is all a little bit beneath me, really. I imagine Professor Heidi Brown, my guest just a few weeks ago, would have observed something similar as she welcomed her 1L law degree students recently. Now, I've worked with people for long enough to know that people are masters of masks and disguises, so whilst I could observe their behaviour, I didn't really know what was going on for them, and I may never know. But that initial behaviour can be quite a problem because as humans we're still wired to make instant decisions a la stress response. Should I run, stand my ground and fight, or freeze on the spot because I'm incapable of moving and let's hope no one notices me? And the reality is people are paying close attention, and from these first days onwards. First impressions count, and it's really hard to reset the impression that somebody makes on you. And as individuals, we have to work quite hard to look for evidence that is different to the impression that's been created. During that induction, I was working with those individuals to help them manage the transition from full-time education to earning while they learn, because it's a very different beast. The organisation, as you might imagine, has some big expectations of their young people, bearing in mind they are paying for their professional qualification, giving them study time and paying them a good salary at the same time. I have to admit that I think apprenticeships are the way to go. Anyway, as you might have expected, I included some information on being an introvert, as the chances are more than half of those new joiners will identify as an introvert if they know what that means yet. Many of you know that I didn't find out until my 30s that what made me different was my introversion. So this got me thinking, what might I have done differently if I'd have known this about myself earlier on? So in this episode, I'm reflecting on my early years in the workplace in the hope that it might help some others in their early careers. This is unusual for me as I'm more used to working with senior leaders and mid-career introverts, so please feel free to share or recommend this episode to others who may benefit, because many of you are working in organisations that will have just had a new intake. So why not share this with them? I was very unhappy during my A-level years at school and had chosen subjects I quite liked because honestly, I didn't really shine at anything. I'm not an academic. I've referred to myself as a late starter on a number of occasions, and that is absolutely accurate. I decided to leave school and look for a job over the Easter holidays and landed the first job I applied for, which was as a drawing office assistant for British Telecom. I was being trained to map and chart where the existing and planned telephone cables, jointing manholes and poles were. This definitely suited my temperament, as we all had a huge drawing board, probably about 20 of us in an enormous room, so there was plenty of space around me, and talking was frowned upon unless we were asking for help or more work. It sounds a bit Dickensian when I say it now, but you know what? It worked just fine for me. I was generally polite and well-mannered thanks to my upbringing, and respected those in authority without question. I learned early on that I couldn't pull the wool over anyone's eyes, as there really is nothing new. It's just that as youngsters, we tend to think that we're the ones who've invented all of the excitement in life. As a woman in my mid-60s now, I can tell you that nothing could be further from the truth. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. When I got caught out being in the town after having gone home with bad hay fever, and I really did suffer badly back then, and still do sometimes actually, I was called into the boss's office the next day and told in no uncertain terms that if I wasn't well enough to work, I wasn't well enough to be in the town. Fair cop and lesson learned. On reflection, I realised that I gravitated to my quieter colleagues, which was pretty easy, as there seemed to be more of us. We could have a laugh over our breaks, which were strictly monitored, and then it was back to the desk and head down. The first big thing I wished I'd done differently was to own my strengths as an introvert rather than to compare myself with others. They were on their own journey and much further ahead than I was, and they were completely different personalities. So comparing made no sense at all on reflection. I am grateful that I eventually found a mentor, but I know it would have benefited me to have found an introverted mentor earlier in my career. It would have saved me years of anguish and self-doubt. I could have left my sense of not enoughness behind much earlier and grown in authentic confidence. If you want to know who you are as an introvert, there are a couple of questionnaires I recommend you take. The first is my own introvert type quiz that goes beyond the Myers-Briggs typing and just focuses on introversion. And through that, you can understand your unique type of introversion. The second is the VIA Character Strength Survey, which looks at the positive individual character traits that we all possess and that are linked to our development, well-being and life satisfaction. This validated tool can help you to discover your strengths and identifies those that you tend to use and rely on the most. These are your key capabilities and they influence how you think, act and feel. They also represent what we value in ourselves and others, so a fantastic tool for self-awareness. I'll make sure the link to both of these questionnaires are in the show notes. I know I'm a lifelong learner, and the most important thing I believe we learn is who and how we are, both in ourselves and in relation to others. And for me, that learning never ends, as I'm growing and developing all of the time. I'm not the same person that I was in my late teens or my 20s or 30s or even my 40s and 50s. So never once think I know who I am and that is that. You're just fooling yourself and others in the process. The next thing I wished I'd mastered earlier was how to articulate my strengths positively, because simply knowing them is really only the beginning. Some of you know I spent decades pretending to be more extroverted because that's what my workplace seemed to demand if I was going to make promotion, etc. Don't do that. It's both exhausting and demeaning. Instead, find the positives in who you naturally are. I am a great listener, which I'm able to do because I'm quieter than most. I am resourceful, so will dig deep and wide to make progress where possible without pestering and becoming needy. I am optimistic, so whilst the engineer in me will always look for problems, the optimist in me will look for solutions. I dislike unnecessary conflict, so I will analyse whether or not I need to express my differing opinion. And if it needs to be heard, I'll say it. I work best in peaceful environments with small teams, and if I feel overwhelmed, I will find a way to recharge my batteries and then re-engage. These are some of the things I've learned about myself that I now own, and I think they're really positive qualities. The next or third thing that I wished I'd known in my early career is that kindness includes honesty. I would often hold back from giving my honest opinion, thinking it might be unkind or hurtful, and I've been a big people pleaser in my past. I now know that it's far more unkind to withhold that honesty. Worse than that, withholding honesty destroys trust. As it turns out, honesty is my third top VIA character strength, so no wonder that this was important to me. I also love how that VIA report suggests people describe me as authentic, direct, genuine and straightforward. I'll take those descriptions all day long. Of course, there are different ways of being honest, and I'm not a fan of brutal honesty. In fact, I've spoken about this on the show fairly recently, I seem to remember. The phrase itself is often the preserve of the gaslighter and the narcissist. It says, "This is going to hurt, but you can't be upset because I'm just being honest." Or, and I've heard this before as well, "It's because I love you." Run a mile. Brutal honesty comes fairly easily to the aggressor, and with a pinch of sugar, a smile or a hug to the passive aggressive individual. Beware and avoid phrases like, "I'm not being rude but," "No offence but," "You asked my opinion so don't turn on me now." And regarding those first two phrases, we have a phrase in the world of learning and development, which is that everything before the but is bullshit, which means they are being rude and they are intending offence. When someone is brutally honest, their language is unfiltered, so it's like a stream of consciousness and there's no real thought given to what they're saying. And if it's you they've been brutally honest to, there's no real room for conversation or exploration. They've landed their opinion on you, end of. An alternative to brutal honesty is compassionate honesty, and I think I'll do a whole episode about this because I do have a lot to say about it. Suffice to say, when someone in your workplace says, "Be honest with me," think compassion, not brutality. The fourth thing I would probably have done differently is to be braver earlier on. Now, some people have said they thought I was brave and I didn't realise it at the time. It's only retrospectively that I can agree with them. Having left school very disillusioned, I began part-time technical study paid for by British Telecom and did really well. It's funny how things change when you find what you want to do. I moved from my drawing office role to a technical engineering role after just a few years of day release, as I was enjoying my studies so much. I was one of very few and the first female engineers at that point in British Telecom. I entered a competition run by ESSO and the Industrial Society to win a place on a Women into Management 5-day residential course, and I was successful in my application. I had to ask my boss for time off to attend, which they approved, and I still have the photo of a very young me on the cover of ESSO's in-house magazine. I applied for promotion, even though I didn't quite meet the full criteria. I've since realised that it's something that men do much more often than women, and I'll hazard a guess that extroverts will apply much more often than introverts if they don't meet the criteria as well. I guess the big lesson here around bravery is to seize the day, grab every opportunity because no one else is guaranteed to do it for you. I continue to work at being braver every day as it's only number 12, so one of my middle character strengths, which means I do have to work at it. As the report says, I do best when I prime myself to use that strength of bravery. The final thing I maybe would have done differently is thought about some longer term goals. When I was younger, the next month or year seemed like a long way away. In fact, I remember talking with friends when we were in our 20s about how exciting the millennium would be when it got here. I clearly remember saying, well, I doubt I'll be celebrating much as I'll be over 40. I can laugh now because at the time 40 plus seemed so old. And here am I, mid-60s, having the best time. I'm more able to be true to who I am, more able to assertively defend a personal boundary, and more able to ask for what I want and need. But I still struggle with goal setting, partly because it seems so masculine to me, and the way too many organisations talk about goals is really impersonal. I'm getting better at intention setting, and it's my intentions that drive my behaviour. But I wonder how much further ahead I'd have been if I'd had clearer life goals earlier on. So, if you're just starting out, or wherever you are in life actually, do think seriously about who you want to be, what you want to have, and what you want to be doing. Those be, do and have goals or intentions are so important. And to get the ball rolling, here are mine. I'll share them in the present tense as the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So it aligns to bring these aspirations, goals or intentions into reality. I am happy, healthy and loved. I do work that I love, shifting the extroversion bias with global clients. I have an abundance of resources that enable me to live a fulfilled life in comfort. See, they're goals and aspirations, but also affirmations, and I'm going to make sure that I say those to myself every day from now on. Now, what about you? How about you share your life goals by popping them in an email to me, Joanna@flourishingintroverts.com, because Howard Klein, lead author and professor of management and human resources at the Ohio State University's Fisher College of Business, said, "You are more likely to be dedicated and unwilling to give up on your goal when you share that goal with someone you look up to." Now, it's pretty presumptuous of me to think that you look up to me, and frankly, I don't need that. But you are sharing it with someone who is in your corner, cheering you on and rooting for your success. So let's hear your life goals now. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.